Okay, what is academic debate then? What is it that you're looking at? I like to talk about what academic debate is because I think that so many people come into this activity with the wrong idea of it. We have a mental image of what debate should be, whether that's based on idealized versions like we see in a movie like The Great Debaters, the Denzel Washington movie a few years ago, or presidential debates and people talking over one another and yelling at each other and whatever, whatever, whatever. That's not necessarily, that is not academic debate. So I would like to give you an example of what the ideal debate looks like. Two of the great debaters in history were Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas. And I found this old, rare video footage of them debating. So take a look.
Party allegiance at times.
Mr. Lincoln, you may reply.
Would the good people like a reply? I said, would the good people like a reply? I'll give you a reply.
Okay, obviously not debate. It's an old Mountain Dew commercial that I just find hilarious. That is probably more similar to what many, many people think academic debating is, but in reality, it's nothing, obviously. But we don't fight, we don't attack each other, we don't attack the person. We look at the arguments, and oftentimes we win debates by finding the points of agreement rather than disagreement. So when we want to understand what debate is, we can look at the three questions that are on your screen right now, and we'll go through those. Arguments are not statements of belief, right? Somebody just standing up and saying, well, this is what I think to be true, or saying, well, how do you answer this? Or what do you know about this? Or who is going to do this? Or how much money is that going to cost? Questions, those are not arguments. Those are just questions. And they're usually not very persuasive unless a debater offers a question and then proceeds to explain why that question highlights something significant that's missing. Assertions, fights, those are not arguments. Arguments are actually logically connected ideas that ultimately help us to prove a point. And like I said a second ago, oftentimes arguments require agreement as much as they require disagreement. Finding the place where you and your opposing team have common ground, and then showing how your side of the debate topic actually best answers the question or best meets the goals that both of you agree in, right? Things like that are ways that debaters can make persuasive arguments. And then also arguments tend to come in three parts, or they should come in three parts. They will make a claim, this is what I want to prove. They'll provide analysis, explaining why that claim is true. They might provide evidence, they might provide quotations, they might provide statistics, they might provide anecdotes from their own life to help you understand it. And then they're going to impact it or make it relevant, explain why it matters in the grand scheme of things. Not every single debater will do all three of those things. And sometimes that leaves us as judges going, I don't know how to vote. I don't know what I'm supposed to do right now. Well, that's on the debaters. That's not on you. That's something that was missing. If they never explain why this was relevant, then they have skipped something, and maybe that's a comment that you want to put on the ballot, right? You do an interesting job of proving this claim, but why does it matter? It would be really helpful if you explained to me why it matters in my decision making. Okay, if we were in a room physically and I could see your faces, this would be a lot easier. But I pose a number of examples of questions just related to what is a winning argument, because a lot of times we hear stuff like this in debate rounds. So the first question is she who wins the most arguments the winner of a debate? The answer to that is absolutely not, right? We could have 20 arguments being presented in a debate round. I could win 19 of them. The other person might win only one of those arguments. But if that argument is more significant, more relevant than the 19 that I won, then they would win the debate, right? It's not about winning the most number of arguments. He who wins the argument with which you agree. No, it's not about what I believe to be true as a judge. It's what the debaters are doing relative to one another. how they're presenting the arguments relative to one another, when they're calling each other out on things, when they're showing the inconsistencies in logic and so forth. We talked about that earlier when I was talking about we practice non-intervention. She who wins the T on the link turn in relation to the perm is the roll of the ballot. A lot of times in debate, we hear people use jargon, debate jargon. The sentence that's on your screen right now is gobbledygook. It doesn't actually mean anything. All of those terms are real terms that debaters use, but they were put together in a sentence that renders them meaningless. But yet we will have sometimes debaters presenting this jargon and expecting judges to vote on it simply because they're using the terms. No, that's not how it works. You have to put it together in a meaningful way. More importantly, I'm going to assume that most of you or all of you are community members, parents, etc., who did not grow up in the world of debate. No debater should be relying on jargon like this when they are debating in front of you. If you don't know what something means, then they are not communicating to you, right? And the goal of every debater is to speak to the judge who has the ballot. They need to adapt to you. So if they use the jargon, they need to explain what that jargon means. They need to educate you as the judge. And if you're left scratching your head going, I don't know what T or link turn or perm or roll of the ballot is, then they didn't explain it to you. And it should be meaningless in the decision at the end of the debate. He who proves the resolution's class-conscious investment in proletariat constellations of fragment and heterogeneity serve as a bifurcated call for imperialistic hegemonic demise of the individual and systemic anti-capitalist engagement of the anarcho-subversive system of ameliorating systemic racism. Okay, you'll hear debaters say things like that. That sentence also largely gobbledygook and doesn't mean much. Again, if they're not adapting to you, if they're not speaking to you, then they are not doing the best job that they could do in that debate. I also intentionally sped up when I read that. My guess, my assumption is that, again, as parents, as community members, volunteers coming in to serve as judges, a debater who's speaking as quickly as I just did is not adapting to you. And it's not your responsibility to make heads or tails of what they're saying or learn how to listen to people speaking fast. It's the debater's job to adapt to you. So what is a winning argument? A winning argument is one that debaters clearly identify as a winning argument. They should explain to you, or they should tell you, this is the most important issue in this debate round. They've identified it for you. They've let you know this is the most important thing. Then they need to take that a step further and explain why it's the winning argument. It's the winning argument because it addresses the assumptions or the needs that my opponents have actually indicated are important. Or this is an issue that needs to be addressed first for whatever reason. They have to explain the why. And then they need to do a better job of explaining their rationale than their opponents do undermining that rationale. And that's what a winning argument in a debate is. Which then brings us to the occupying space and the field of play. I get this from my former boss. I used to coach at the University of Alaska Anchorage, and the director of debate there, Steve Johnson, has an entire, he wrote a book on on debates, and he talks about the metaphor of occupying space when we talk about argumentation. And so he came up with this visual representation of it. He said that we could take any particular debate topic, such as resolve the US federal government should ban tobacco products. And we can imagine that that resolution creates a field of play where one team has all of the potential arguments on the pro side or the affirmative side, explaining why those tobacco products should be banned. They're on that side of the field. Whereas the negative has all of the potential arguments against it on the con side, on the negative side. And those two teams will come together and clash on this field of play. Over the course of the debate, you are going to find that there is horizontal debate, right? We can imagine that this field of play of banning tobacco products, the arguments in favor and the arguments against, we can envision a debate where the two teams have divided that into three sub-fields of play, or three lines of argumentation. One about public health, and the debaters will clash back and forth, talking about the harms of public smoking and how banning tobacco products would actually improve public health and so forth. We can imagine that the debaters would meet and argue back and forth on the economic consequences of banning tobacco products, right? That on the one side, the negative might say things, like if we ban tobacco products, that's a lot of farmers who lose their jobs. That's people who work in the processing plants, the people who transport, the truck drivers who transport those tobacco products to market, the stores that lose revenue, et cetera, et cetera. The affirmative, the pro team might push back with arguments about economic consequences like, yes, but there's also long-term consequences. When people smoke, they end up in the hospital. That costs money. That's a drain on resources as well. And then third, there might be a line of argument going back and forth on smokers' rights or individual rights. And so the con, you could imagine, would make arguments about people should have the freedom to do to their bodies whatever they want to do to their bodies. And the pro could say, sure, that's great, that's fine that you can make that choice, but what about the children? What about the bartender? What about the waitress or the waiter who is dealing with secondhand smoke? They didn't make that choice to smoke, the smoker did, right? So you can imagine that there might be three lines of argument over the course of the debate. This is obviously not based on that same discussion that we talked about, or probably not, but you could imagine at the end of the debate, so they met up on these three issues, they had the potential to make arguments, and then by the end of the debate, the con team won the first issue, the pro team won issues 2 and 3. Now again, if we were in a face-to-face situation, I'd ask you, so does that mean that the pro team won? No, the pro team did not necessarily win that debate, even though they won 2 of the 3 issues in the debate. The reason is because this doesn't tell the entire picture, right? We don't see all of the relevance yet when we only explore the horizontal debate. In fact, when I have community members come to me and they say, I have a really hard time judging this debate round, or I'm really uncomfortable judging this debate round because I don't know who should win. Usually, after I don't talk to this before they filled out their ballot. This is like after they've turned it in. We can talk through and I can find out that a couple of things may have happened. Sometimes when you're confused at the end of the debate, what happened is that one team put forth their case and they did a really great job of explaining that case, explaining the relevance of that case, winning all of the arguments. And the negative team did nothing to respond to it. But the negative team did have their own case that they did a really good job of explaining and providing good research behind, et cetera, and the affirmative ignored that. And so you have 2 ships passing in the night, right, where there was no clash. That's one reason why judges sometimes get confused or uncertain of who should win the debate. Sometimes there's significant clash back and forth on each of those issues, and the judge is just left going, wow, this team won one issue, this team won another issue, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Again, what happened is there's something else missing, the vertical debate. Every debate round should have both horizontal and vertical debate. The vertical debate is when debaters take the time to compare the different issues that were present in the debate, right? We had public health, we had economics, and we had individual rights in that imaginary hypothetical tobacco debate round. At some point in the debate, the competitors should be explaining why certain issues are more important than others, why they're more relevant to your decision as a judge than others, and so forth. They need to engage in that debate. If you are left at, going back to the idea of being an educator, if you are left at the end of the debate going, I don't know which issue matters the most, put that on the ballot. At the end of the debate, I don't think that either of the teams were taking the time to explain why the issues that they were winning were the issues that mattered most in the debate. It would have been helpful if you had taken some time in your speeches to explain why this issue was more important than this issue, or vice versa. We could envision the imaginary tobacco debate where at the end of the round, the pro team has not only overwhelmingly won the issue on whether or not public health is an effect of tobacco products and tobacco product use, but they also argued vertically that that was the most important issue, that saving people's lives, helping people's lives, and so forth is the most important issue in the round. And the negative, they won the smokers' rights, the individual rights, and they won the economic consequences, but they did not do a good job of explaining why either of those two issues are the most important. So in this hypothetical debate, the pro team has occupied the most space and probably wins this debate round. Now, I said earlier, finding those points of agreement and using those points of agreement to illustrate how argumentation works. We could envision another scenario in this particular hypothetical debate where maybe health is the most important. The negative team might be able to win the round by saying, yeah, sure, health is important, but let's look at what happens when we have an economic recession. People's overall health decreases, stress levels go up, and so forth, and that has an impact on health. Or actually, yeah, so you could maybe expand the debate that way and show that, hey, we win the economic consequences, and that's going to give us some inroads onto this health argument as well. That's a way that they might engage in the vertical debate a little bit.